Hey, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to step back into the metaverse, and this time I'm going to show you how you can get started coding in Altspace VR. Now, if you've never heard of Altspace VR before, it's Microsoft's public metaverse platform. And what it's particularly good at is things like live events and live collaboration spaces. So if you want to host a virtual conference, a virtual meeting, any sort of virtual event, then Altspace VR is perfect for that. And the reason it's particularly good at this is that it gives you a lot of flexibility on who can attend those events, scheduling those events, but you can create your own virtual universes and your own virtual worlds within that. But not only that, one of the cool things about Altspace VR, it has a thing called a mixed reality extension toolkit. And what that allows you to do is create programmatically your own objects and your own customizations that you can place within those worlds. So if you want to have something like a digital billboard within that room powered by an API that could be updated live, then you'd be able to do that. If you wanted to create some sort of virtual robot that you can speak and interact with, then you can do that. And more importantly, it's all written in JavaScript. And today I'm going to show you how you can get started with that toolkit and then how you can deploy that onto Azure Cloud and have that work within the Altspace VR environment. So with all that being said, let's get started. All right, so if you've never used Altspace VR before, the first thing you're going to have to do is go to its website. So if you go to altvr.com, and you see it's got some options available. So you can see it runs on the Oculus, it runs on your desktop, and it's giving you an option to download to your local machine as well. So I've already got that downloaded onto my Mac. You can feel free to click on that and download. Now, you're obviously going to have to register as well. I've obviously registered already, but you will need to do that. But once you've done that, what you can do is sign in and go and explore some worlds. So we'll do that for a second. We'll just click in sign in. And then you can see lots of events. This is what I was saying before, right? You can see these various things like virtual meetups. You can see, meditation things. You can see tryouts for singing. You can see dating games. So there's lots of cool things that you can do. And more importantly, you can create your own events if you want there as well. So now I did say that there is a whole lot of business stuff as well. So if I just click on to more, and one of the things that you're going to see within that is this option called Worlds. Now, Worlds is essentially an experimental feature if you want to have your own worlds. I'll show you how to enable that in a second. But as you can see, there's a lot of worlds that are already created already. But if I click on my worlds, you see I've got some universes and worlds already. So if I click on Chris Hay UK's universe, you can see there's some worlds that I pre-created. In fact, if I go into La Chuck, maybe I go into Chuck Boardroom. And then if I wanted to, I could click into enter now, and then I could enter that within the browser as well. But I've actually got Altspace VR installed on my desktop machine as well. So if I just click on that, you can see it will bring up Altspace VR on my Mac. It'll take a few seconds to load up, and there, as you can see there, I've got the same options as I did before. So if I was to click into Chris Hay UK's home, for example, and here you go, here's my sort of virtual home, and I can move around. Okay, so what we're going to do in this tutorial, we're obviously going to create our own little world, which we're going to customize and put our own objects in with the extension toolkit. So in order to work with the mixed reality extension toolkit and create our own worlds, etc., what we need to do is participate in the early access program, and it's fairly instantaneous to set up. So to do that, all you need to do is click on your profile and then hit on the edit button. When you hit on the edit button, you can see here there's a worlds beta and an early access, and you can just click them on, and then once you've done that, you can just hit update, and then it will give you access, and it happens almost instantaneously. So in our case, now that that's enabled, I can click on worlds, and then I can click onto my worlds, and then that's going to allow me to create my own universal worlds. So we'll do that quickly. So we'll just click create a new universe. We'll call this Chuck Universe, and then we'll make it private, and then we can put loads of things in there. There's lots of things it's going to ask for. We're not going to bother about that today. We'll just click on create universe, put a description, hello world, and then that will go and create this new universe for us. So you can see I've got this Chuck universe, and then there's no worlds within that universe, so I'll just create a new world as well, and we will call this Chuck World. Hello Chuck. Now, again, I can make this private. The reason I want to make it private is I don't want it to appear in the public worlds, but of course you can if you want to. There's a whole set of things for roles. So if I click on that, you can see there's roles you can grant to folks. So the ability to terraform, etc. So anybody, the ability to fly. We're not going to worry about that today. And then, of course, there's a bunch of templates that you can have as well. So you can see things like beaches, campfires, etc. But then you've got sort of office type environments. So you can see keynotes if you want to do a keynote, or you can do boardrooms, for example, or meeting spaces. So that's why it's pretty good for business environments or virtual events in general, because those types of pre-built templates are there. Now, if you want to, you can actually go and create your own world. So you can do that within Unity. I'll probably do a video on how you do that at some point, but essentially it's just download a specific version of Unity, install the world uploader tool, and then you can create a Unity scene as normal and then upload it into the environment, and then it's going to work for you. But I'll probably do another video on that at some point. So for today, though, we'll just create a new let's create a meeting area. Actually, that would be more interesting. So once that's done, we've selected that, we can just click on create world, and then it's going to create that new world for us. And then if we wanted to, we could enter into that. So actually, if I just come back onto my Mac for a second, let's go to worlds, which is appearing there. And then as you can see, if I go to my worlds, you can see the new world that we created, Chuck World, has appeared. So we'll just enter that. It gives me a warning. I'll click enter. And then it's going to load up that universe and that world. Cool. So there we go. Here's my new meeting space. And as you can see, I can sort of move around, I can rotate, etc. So what we want to do now, though, is we want to be able to create our own objects that we can place in that world. And to do that, we need to use the Mixed Reality Extension Toolkit. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go to the Mixed Reality Extension SDK. So what you can see here, github.com, Microsoft Mixed Reality Extensions SDK, you can see that there's an SDK there. You know, it's not been updated in a while. It's been a few years since anything's been really updated. But this is the SDK that we're going to use to mess around with things. And again, you can see some of the dependencies are pretty old. It's saying install Git, install Node.js 8. So that doesn't really work for us. And this is probably the problem that I have with the SDK, is that when I start working with it, I get a lot of errors. So you can even see here that these samples, it's like 2-3 years old. Again, Node.js 8. And then if I were to install that, and let's do this very quickly, then I'm going to run into a few problems quite quickly. So let me show you what I mean. So we've got a nice little space there. I'm going to do a git clone of those samples. It'll take a few seconds to create. As you can see, it's now installed. And if I just go into Mixed Reality Extension SDK samples, and then if I go into samples and go into Hello World, and then I click Code Dot, open that up in Visual Studio. You can see I've got a nice little sample in here, which is, it's all written in TypeScript. And if I just look at the app there, what it's going to do is create this little hello world mesh in here. And that's okay. So if I just type in npm install, it's going to create all the dependencies, etc. Yeah, and as you can see, there's 22 vulnerabilities. Okay, that's dealable with. Let's type in npm run build so that I can build my application. And then you can see I've got 155 problems. I mean, they're all warnings and stuff like that, but you know, okay, fine. If I want to, I can just do npm run start, and then it will kick off. So now that it's installed, you can see it's created a little HTTP 127.0.13901 web server. So if I click on that, you can see it says MRE Hello World. So we know it's up and running from this sample. You know, as I said, it's designed to be a little bit older. It's a little bit sketchier and all that, a bunch of vulnerabilities. but it kind of works out of the box, as you can see there. So if I just open up the server TS for a second, so it's all written in TypeScript, what you can kind of see there is it's starting, listening for connections and serving static files. So it's got a static web server there, and it's serving out files from the public folder. So if I click on index.html, you'll see this MRE hello world. Also in that public folder, you're seeing a couple of GLB files and some JPEGs and things, and that's fine. So essentially what we've got here is a static web server. By the way, if you're interested, that is actually created in Restify. So that's the underlying web server that's being used by the SDK. And then what it's going to do is accept any incoming sessions that happen. And essentially what's going to then happen is that it's going to open up a WebSocket interface, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then that WebSocket interface is what's going to serve up any code. So you can see there that any incoming connections for WebSockets is going to go to new app context. So let's open up app. And then what you can see here is we've got this hello world class. And then essentially what it's going to do here is create this hello world text. So I'll go through this in a little bit more detail there in a second. But essentially all that's going to happen is going to put a little text box up there which says hello world, and then there's going to be a little spinning animation underneath there. So there's a lot of code, but we'll come back to that in a second. So if I wanted to, I can actually, now that it's up and running on my local machine, I can actually display that object within my AltspaceVR environment. So I could just click on World Editor, and then if I open up the editor panel, click on Basics, and then you see here SDK app. And then if I just type in WS localhost, and then so WS obviously for WebSockets, and then put port 3901 because that's how that's being created. And if I click confirm, you can see the hello world application that we've created. So now what I've got is a little spinning cube that says hello world running in that environment. And essentially all that's happening is the AltspaceVR tool is calling out via WebSockets to localhost on my machine. So that's pretty cool. And if I wanted to, I could go back into Visual Studio Code and I could maybe change this text. So I can say, hello. So straight away, you're going to start to think that this is an entirely unsatisfactory experience, right? Because I mean, here's my point. I'm sort of changing things in here. In my app TS, it's just not being reflected properly in my environment. And even if I do a restart here and then come back, because it's TypeScript, it's not being compiled, etc. So it's a really unsatisfying boilerplate, right? It's designed for an older version of Node.js. It's coming up with a bunch of errors. It's not doing hot reloads properly. It's just very frustrating. And then it's going to get even worse when I want to do a Dockerfile and be able to deploy that to Azure. So one of the things that I've done instead is, and you can use this the way that it is, but one of the things I've done instead is created my own boilerplate. And if you just go to git clone https and you go to github.com, Chris Hay UK, MRE boilerplate.git. And by the way, I'll provide that link in the description so you can use that. And you'll see it will create our own boilerplate. So if we just open this up in Visual Studio Code for a second, and then I'll go through this very slightly. As you can see, it's very similar to the boilerplate that we had before, but I've removed all of the samples and things. I've got the server, it looks pretty much the same as we had before. But if you look underneath here for a second, and I've simplified this a little bit, so it's just in hello world, I'm not putting the spinning piece behind that. But what you will be able to see is I've simplified it quite a bit. And what I've done instead is started using things like ESBuild underneath there. So for when I want to do the dev servers, you can see I'm using ESBuild and ESBuild-Register. And that means that the transpilation from TypeScript to JavaScript is happening at runtime. So I don't need to do a build to be able to translate my TypeScript into JavaScript. ESBuild-Register will just do that on the fly, and therefore my nodemon, which is doing my hot reload, whenever I make a change to my TypeScript, it's just going to do that compilation for me. So therefore, I'm not going to have to stop, do a build, do a reload, any of that business I had to do on the previous boilerplate. Also, it means it's much faster because ESBuild is much cleaner as well. So actually, if you want to deep dive into ESBuild and how to use that with things like React applications, etc., then you can check out my video and the link will appear in the top right hand corner. So now, if I just do a quick npm install, just so that I can install all my dependencies onto my machine, what you're going to see is I have a lot less vulnerabilities. I've brought it down to 6 vulnerabilities as opposed to the 20 order that it had. I can probably tidy up that a little bit more and get rid of those final ones. But it's a much cleaner build in that sense. But if I just do an npm run dev server now, you can see it's up and running. So if I come back into AltspaceVR, and then what we'll do is we'll just add this again. So we'll do SDK app, we'll put in WS, localhost, and I think it was 3901. And then if we just hit confirm, and you can see our nice little hello world applications there, all the spinning and all that's gone. Let's close the panel, but more importantly now, if I want to change that hello world, so let's come back into my Visual Studio Code and let's change that from saying hello world to hello world. I'm going to hit save. You can see it's automatically done the restart due to the changes. So, and you see it's kicking off the ESBuild-Register. So that TypeScript change has happened. Nodemon's done the restart. And then if I come back into AltspaceVR, you can see hello appearing. So I don't need to restart my server, do my TypeScript build, etc., etc., etc. None of that needs to occur. It's all going to happen and give me that nice hot reload. So I think that's a much better dev experience. It's much quicker. So anyway, if you want to use that boilerplate, feel free to do so, because I think the experience is a lot better. If you want to do a production build of that, then obviously you can do an npm run build. And then underneath that, what it's going to do, if I just come back into my package JSON for a second, what you can see there is all it's going to do is call the build TS script, which is essentially going to call TypeScript compiler. Now, I do that for a particular reason. So when I'm doing development and hot reloads, etc., I use ESBuild for the transpilation, but when I do my production builds, I just rely on the TypeScript compiler, because I just don't want to have something from ESBuild that's not quite right. I want to just use the clean TypeScript compiler. So that's how I do that. Again, if you're comfortable with ESBuild, you can have that do the compilation for production. I just happen to prefer using TypeScript compiler in that particular case. So now that that's done, if I was just to do an ls, you can see it's now created that dist folder there. And I could do an npm run serve if I want to, and then it's going to start that from my serve folder. So within, if you look at npm run serve, all it's going to do is call node dist server.js. So if we look in dist, you can see there's server.js and it's all transpiled, etc. So far we've seen static text, but I did promise you that we would be able to pull data from APIs and then be able to show that within an environment. So what we're going to do now is we are going to get some data from an API and we're going to load it up. And how we're going to do that is we're going to pull some Chuck Norris jokes. So what we'll do is just do a npm install -save Axios. Once that's installed, we will go back into Visual Studio Code and we're going to replace this hello world with a call to the Chuck Norris API. So to do that, we just need to import Axios first. So we'll just add Axios onto our imports list. So what we'll do now is just get a Chuck Norris joke from the API. So we'll just put a comment, get a Chuck Norris joke. And there we go. For once in its life, Github Copilot has done something useful. It's actually predicted how to get a Chuck Norris joke in a useful way. So well done. That's actually surprised me there. So now all I'm going to do is replace the contents here. So I'll just type in joke, and I need to access data, and then we want the value. And then if we hit save there, so if I just start up my server again, and then if I come back into AltspaceVR, and you can see, if we just move around a little bit, you can see rather than it says hello world, it says when Chuck Norris does push-ups, he doesn't push himself whatever, he does some whatever. The cool thing is, if I restart this, if we do a restart and then we come back in, we get more Chuck Norris jokes. Chuck Norris chest hair is the main ingredient in Kevlar. So we could do this all day, right? So what have we discovered there? For some reason, GitHub Copilot has actually found itself being useful, and it can actually get Chuck Norris jokes. But more importantly, what we're able to do is start creating those interactive applications. That's great that Altspace VR can talk to my local machine via localhost, and that makes sense because it's running on a desktop client, and therefore when it makes a call to WebSocket localhost, it's really making a call to my machine. That isn't really scalable and doesn't work for somebody else. If I want to make this world available to the whole world and I want to be able to display Chuck Norris jokes, then I need to be able to take this application that I built and be able to host it up on the cloud somewhere. So what we're going to do is store it in Azure Container Instances. So we'll essentially take that Dockerfile and deploy it. Now this again is one of the reasons that I'm using my Dockerfile and not using the one from the MRE samples toolkit, because it doesn't really handle the Docker files and the Docker build very well, whereas I've spent a bunch of time in getting that right. So what we are going to do is we will get ourselves set up with Azure, and then once we're set ourselves up with Azure properly, we'll deploy that and then we'll update this application so that it works within the toolkit. If you haven't used Azure before, then you're going to need to install Azure's CLI tools. So the way to do that is you would just type in brew update and brew install Azure CLI, and then it's going to. So now that it's installed, I can just log into Azure by typing in Azure login. And then what that's going to do is fire up a little thing to say, go sign into your account. You can see I can just click on mine and then it says it's logged in. Now, obviously that means you will need to have your own Azure account registered and signed in to be able to do that. But you know, that's the way it is, right? So as you can see now, I'm logged into Azure. The next thing that I'm going to need from Azure is, because we're going to do this with Docker images, I really need a container registry to hold my Docker image within. So again, you can do that within Azure. So if you go to portal.azure.com, again, you'll need to have an account. And then you can see container registries within here. I've got one already called Crusade UK. If you want to create one, you can just create one and then type in whatever you want for your container registry, and then just next it all the way through. So all you would need to do is put a resource group, so which is essentially how it's going to get charged. So I typically use this one here. You give it a name, you put the location, UK South, wherever. If you want any availability zones, you don't need to do that, and then you go next, and then it's done. I'm not going to do that because I've already got one here called Chris Hay UK, container registry already set up. So I don't really need to do that. But that's just something that you're going to have to do in advance. Once that's done, you need to log into your container registry as well. So you do that by typing in AZ. So that's your Azure CLI again, ACR for Azure Container Registry, login, name, and then you put in the name of container registry you're logging into. So essentially this command is saying go log into my container registry. Do that. And then you see I've got an error there because I've not got my Docker running. So let me just run my Docker for a second. And there you go. I am now logged into the container registry. Obviously, what I am going to need to do is I need to then build my application. So if we look here and go into my Dockerfile, and again, this is one of the reasons my boilerplate is slightly better. What I have got here is a multi-stage Docker build. So it will actually build your application from beginning to end. So you don't need to do anything in advance. It will install the dependencies. It will create a build. So it will actually do the build for you. And then what it's going to do is deploy that into production image. So you can see here, I've set an environment variable Chuck Hello MRE. That's probably the important thing for you to do, is that when you create your Azure Container Instance, you need to set this base URL. So So whatever name you give it in Azure Container Instance, you need to give it the same name. So in this case, I'm calling it Chuck-Hello MRE. And then as long as you do that, then we're good to go. So that's the only thing that you will need to change within here. So if you decide to call it Fred, you would type in Fred, and then obviously you would need to use the same URL as a whole, but we'll cover that when we get to that. Then eventually it's going to finish off that build and it's going to make it run. So to build that, all you need to do is type in docker build kit equals 1, and then docker build. I'm on a Mac M1 at the moment, so I'm specifying my platform is Linux AMD 64 because I don't want to build it as an ARM 64 because it's not going to run. So I'm building it as an AMD 64. If you're not on a Mac M1 or anything like that, you don't need to worry about any of that. You don't need to do -- platform or whatever. But if you are on a Mac, then that's something you'll need to do. And then I'm going to tag this as Chris Hay UK MRE boilerplate. So once I've done that, it's going to go and build my image. That'll take a little bit of time because it's a multi-stage build, but once we've done all of that, it will give me a nice clean image. Okay, now that that's built, if I do a Docker images, you will see if I come to the very top there, you can see I've got my new MRE boilerplate image there. It seems I've messed up the name. I forgot to put an E at the end there. No worries, we'll worry about that in a second. But actually, one of the things I need to do is actually use the Chris Hay UK Azure CLI MRE boilerplate, because one of the things I need to do if I want to be able to push that up into Azure Container Registry, then I need to give it the Azure Container Registry namespace. So what I'm going to do is retag this image here so that it has the same as this, and then I can deploy that. So what we will do here, let's just clear this out for a second. So what we can do is we can actually just fix up that other one really quickly. So we could just do docker tag Chris Hay UK MRE boilerplate and turn that into Chris Hay UK MRE boilerplate. And there we go. If I do a Docker images now, then you'll see I will now have boilerplate at least being tagged correctly. But that doesn't matter. What we actually need to be able to do is, in order to deploy into Azure Container Registry, we need to give it an Azure Container Registry namespace. So what I will do now is just do the exact same thing, but rather than saying MRE boilerplate there, what we will do is do chrishayuk.cr.io MRE boilerplate, and now that will be tagged correctly. And if I do a Docker images, you can see at the very top there now we've got Chris Hay UK Azure CLI MRE boilerplate. That's tagged as latest, and then that's what we're going to do. So now to push that up into the Azure Container Registry, I can just do a docker push Chris Hay UK .azure.cr.io/MRE boilerplate. And then that will take that image that we've built, and then it will push it up into Azure Container Registry. Now it's done. If I come back into Azure Container Registry, so if we were to now go into our repositories down at the bottom here, you can see there's my MRE boilerplate. And then if I was to click on that, you can see the last update was about a minute ago. So it's got the new Docker image that I built, and it's in that repository. So now that that's done, what I want to be able to do is take that container image that I've got running in this repository. I want to create a new container instance off the back of that. So what I can do here, create a new container instance, which is going to use that image that is in the container registry. So I will just create container instance here. As you can see, it's empty at the moment. I will click on the create button, and then that's going to give me some options. And what I will do is I will select a resource group. So a resource group, as I said, is essentially allows you to organize things, and it allows you to select a subscription, i.e. how you're going to get billed. So I've got one called Hello Azure Functions. As I said before, I've got to give it the same name as I used in that Dockerfile. So I've set that here. I've set my region to UK South. You can set it to wherever you want. I don't need an availability zone. But then here, the image source, is I can just select from here. Now you can put it in any registry you want. So if you want to use the Docker image from Docker Hub, you could do that, or from Google, but I'm going to use the image in Azure Container Registry. So you can see I'm going to use the Chris Hay UK registry, and you can see it's picked up MRE boilerplate, and I'm going to select the latest. So all of that is good. I'm going to click next. I need to give it a DNS label, so I'm going to just type in Chuck hello MRE, and then again this is going to be, you can see it's got .uk South Azure Container IO. So this combined with this is what forms your base URL in your image. You can see it's got port 80 for TCP done there, so that's fine. Nothing to change there, and again, there's nothing I want to change on any of these processes. So now I'm just going to hit review and create. That is good. I'll hit create, and then it's going to create my container instance. Okay, so as you can see, my deployment is now complete. If I want to, I could just bring up the website, Chuck hello MRE. You can see it's coming back with the hello world, so I can access that publicly. So now all I need to do is make the same change in AltspaceVR as I did before. So if I come back into AltspaceVR, what I'm going to do is click on the editor panel again. We will just get rid of this one, and now what we'll do is exactly what we did before. We'll click on basics, we'll put SDK app, but this time we're going to put the Azure container instance address. So it'll be WS again for WebSockets, and this time it's going to be Chuck hello MRE, and it's going to be at UK South .Azure Container .io, and if I hit confirm, it'll take a second, and there you can see, let's close this for a second, it's now pulling Chuck Norris facts. Chuck Norris is in love with Bruce Lee. So there you go. Key thing is it is pulling that from Azure Online there. So now that's going to be available to everyone, and it's not just on my local machine. So that is pretty powerful because everything can be API driven. As I said, you can do some really cool stuff. You can do spinning animations, you can load glTF files, so you can load objects, you can make them animated, create robots, etc. But hopefully what you can see is the power of using something like AltspaceVR, using the mixed reality extensions toolkit, which you can then start to create your own custom APIs and then start doing smart components, smart APIs within the public metaverse, and be able to do more interesting things. You could connect it up to things like IoT networks, you can connect it up to your own APIs, so it really becomes a very cool and interesting channel. Anyway, I hope this has been useful and gives you an idea of how you can get started in something like AltspaceVR and use your existing JavaScript and TypeScript tools, and how you can use my Boilerplate and Azure to then host that publicly with scale. Anyway, thanks very much, and I'll catch you on the next video.